Everybody. I'm Melanie Hughes. I'm a librarian at Indiana University Southeast, and I'm here with my wonderful colleagues from the School of Education. Dr. Bradford Griggs here, and Dr. Sumreen Asim in from Vancouver. We're in Southern Indiana on our campus, Dr. Griggs and I, and we're delighted to have you here to share about our discoveries with 3D artifacts and pedagogy related to 3D artifacts and virtual learning. All right, so we are going to get into our why of how we got into our research and what we hope for our students to learn. And we'll talk about some of the frameworks from each of our disciplines: social studies, education, and elementary STEM, secondary social studies and elementary STEM. And we'll talk about our methodologies of creating the images, and also a little bit of how we're applying them in the classrooms with our pedagogy. And then some of our findings of what our students are saying about using these objects and what we think are the implications with this technology. And a special thanks to our sponsors. When you're out on the bleeding edge of technology, you can't get stuff done or buy cool equipment or pay for students without grants. And we are fortunate enough that we received 2 grants from our state library, and eventually our images will become part of Indiana Memory, and then they'll get picked up by the Digital Public Library of America as part of our national heritage of our artifacts. And a quote from Einstein to get us thinking. Our goal was, what are we going to do, and how's it going to help our students? How can we make these objects accessible and get more use? Really, we had a collection of artifacts in the Center for Cultural Resources. Dr. Griggs and I met in 2017. Do you want to tell them what your dream was, where you wanted to work when you grew up?
Oh, when I grew up, I wanted to be the curator of the Smithsonian Institution. So we kind of like have this museum, I wouldn't call it a fetish, but a really love of museums. And one of the things we also noticed was not just with our pedagogy, but many of the local cultural institutions didn't have the means nor the resources to digitize a lot of their artifacts, and so they were just not seen either in the classroom or by a decent amount of people in the area. So one of it was preserving the treasures that existed out in the community.
We knew that 95% of the Smithsonian's artifacts are in mothballs at any given time. And we learned that similar things are happening at local cultural heritage institutions in Southern Indiana. So we wanted to make those accessible for our students and their students.
And also, we also wanted to think about our candidates and our future teachers and what education is going to look like as technology kind of integrates more and more into educational pedagogies and also just reality itself. And so making all these wonderful artifacts part of people's everyday life, we can kind of bring history more alive to them, no matter where they are in the world. So we were very interested in that aspect of it as well.
Okay, we're going to dive right into an artifact. Let's go.
You want to talk about the pedagogy of this, Dr. Griggs?
So when I first saw this thing in the Cultural Resources Institute, or our Center for Cultural Resources, I could not figure out what in the name of God this thing was, right? And so I was walking around with it and I was like, kids need to see this because it is such an interesting thing. And so what do you guys think it is? Any ideas? Any ideas what this could be? Anybody want to take a guess that is looking at it in your camera? Like spin it around.
Journal, good guess.
Good
Melissa?
guess.
Spin it around, spin it
No,
around.
it's not.
Oh,
It
okay.
won't do that, yeah. Any other guesses from our audience members?
Any idea what continent it's from?
Wine storage, drinking vessel, bird sound. All right, just give it to them now.
It is it's a sake. Is it a sake thing?
Sake holder.
Sake holder, right. So unlike the sake of the little glasses that we have now for sake, this was a way to have sake and also have a decorative piece.
I think, and I don't know, I would think of maybe reclining sake consumption, but we'll have to talk to Japanese archaeologists or anthropologists to figure out.
And when they told me that's what it was, I didn't believe them. So, and this in a 3D image as it rolls around is even more provocative, because as it spins around, it looks more and more like a sculpture and not like any utilitarian type artifact. So,
And we'll have links to this at the end for you all to access the images. So just didn't know how that would play over Zoom. So one thing we've learned during this pandemic is we wish we had finished digitizing everything about 6 months before March 2020. The process started for us with the grant we got in the fall of 2017, and we are still processing some of the artifacts. The technology keeps getting better, the software keeps getting better, and our images keep getting sharper, and our student keeps gaining experience. Now he's almost a senior. We're trying to get him to finish everything before we get him graduated.
and train somebody else.
And train someone else.
So we can keep the grant going, because it definitely is a great way for an educational institution like ours to have inroads into these local cultural institutions that always need manpower, they always need support, they always need extra set of hands or computer space or whatever to do things. And that was another reason to get these things done and to get them out and make them work. But it takes a lot longer than we thought originally. We were very, very
Naive.
wishful. Right? Yeah,
Okay.
and we thought it would take an hour or two to do one of these objects.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go into a little bit about our collective why. As we know, with PISA standards and looking at testing and assessments across the globe and nations and countries, we're not standing too well as an industrial revolution and a country that has so much equity, social equity, economic equity. We are really not doing well and staying true to our mission. And we really would like to see a lot of literacy in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And the reason that Dr. Griggs and I have leveraged Ms. Hughes is because she's the official connector on our campus, and she also helps us make our dreams and missions come through and helps us connect to resources that we don't really think about all the time, because we're down in the trenches and teaching our classes and our coursework, because we're a teaching focused university. The other thing that I also want to bring to limelight is that just having technology around us is not good enough. We need to actually model and demonstrate it in our methods courses, be it elementary or secondary. And I think that we are 2 decades into the 21st century, and we're still working on these specific goals of oral communication, written communication, bringing innovation. Our curricula, a lot of them are currently scripted, and we want our educators to start thinking outside the box and be comfortable with the unknown, because things are changing. The pendulum is swinging again. Always making sure that we're also sharing that we are collaborative in our spaces. We don't stay within our department, but we leverage the library resources and other departments as well, and industry partners. With those communication skills at our table, we all have a voice, and we're able to have a lot more deeper thinking and critical lenses when we are collaborating around the same table. And that will ultimately have more STEM literate students in our P-12 schools. And that also encompasses digital literacy. How many of us are methods instructors in our own teacher preparation programs that are not emulating the use of digital technology. And it's unfortunate because we are not just supposed to stay content specific, but we should be leveraging technology across all content areas. And that's going to increase our productivity as well. I also wanted to make sure that whatever I do in my classroom is timely. It's not just I'm doing assignments that are not going to be practical. I want them to take it in the classrooms right away. It needs to be engaging. We have to stay true to our mission and have our students interacting, not having passive learning model lessons. It needs to be applicable in their context. Context matters just as much as content. So we need to know what our school districts are using and what their needs are, and make sure that all of our learners are actively participating, and also allowing them that free exploration time whenever we're using new tools. I am wearing multiple hats in this presentation, and my lens comes from, I'm a STEM educator, but I also am a proponent of using technology, and our framework goes along with the technology standards, our national standards, where we are educators, and we're going to leverage technology in multiple ways. And one of the ways we're going to do it is by showing leadership. And our paper that we're going to share at the end will share a little bit more about that. Go ahead, Ms. Muse.
Sure. And then for library standards, I just gave an example from higher ed, since I'm supporting our teacher candidates at the university here. And this is the visual literacy of ACRL's visual literacy standards. And a lot of these components that we use in the library world can easily be corresponded to what's going on in secondary and elementary education with our teacher candidates. I didn't get into, like, my background also is a school librarian media specialist, but we also have our own visual literacy standards that we use for our K-12 kids as well.
Go ahead, Dr. Griggs.
So, and of course, with social studies, we have a bunch of different standards, but the main one that we use that teacher ed candidates use in the classroom, in the K-12 classroom, is the C3 standards. And so they are inquiry standards. So one of the problems with history was that it was just kind of rote memorization and labeled as the most boring class in high school. And so one of the things the National Council of Social Studies wanted to do was to change that, because if you've ever been involved in like historical research or archaeology or anything where you're trying to investigate something, the amount of buy-in is really heavy. And so this inquiry arc from the C3 standards is designed to create that kind of questioning. You've learned these tools, you're evaluating the things that you found, and then you're communicating the results. And one of the things they want to focus on is communicating results. Like, now that you found out this problem and you found out some of the things that have caused this problem, what are you going to do about it? And so that was a really big deal in social studies.
Going along with using the inquiry framework, both in our social study context and our science context, I want to share some of the things that we're doing in the elementary program, and Dr. Griggs will move on and share some of the things that we're doing in secondary. And a lot of these items that we're sharing with you are cross-disciplinary, and we are welcoming any questions at the end of the session that will help you answer some things that you might have for your own context. In this particular picture, I'm sharing with you a iPad being used with a Curioscope teacher, and the app that we're using is called Virtuality, and it actually makes a lot of this body systems within our body come alive. It talks about the digestive system, it talks about the nervous system, and it talks about the urinary system. And what the iPad does, it lets you walk around and explore this in a 3D modeling way. So it's better for interactive engagement. And I also am a proponent. It's not good enough just to have that technology, but it's important as educators and facilitators of knowledge to ensure that we also give the students question before we hand them the tools, and then have them document during the process, and also then document after. And so with augmented reality and 3D, us teachers don't lose our voice compared to when virtual reality, in my opinion, we kind of lose that voice. So you have to assist and facilitate and guide through questions. The other thing I wanted to share with you is there's a platform called Merge Cube, and it has Merge Cubes that you can purchase. And there's also a dashboard that speaks to talking about the solar system, or in the following slide, museum artifacts come to life in your own venue. And also the skeletal system is highlighted here, but there's so many ways to use Merge Cubes in your classroom that will speak to multiple curriculums and can be used in hybrid learning and face-to-face traditional classrooms, as well as virtual learning. So embedding those resources that are readily available is so important, because industry is already using it. A lot of our medical schools are using it, and business training is also using it for training as well on machinery. So it's high time that we change the ways that we're doing and really speak to the 21st century skills that we really want for our students. I am going to share with you, I'm going to stop sharing this slide and go into a short video, because I think the video captures what the Smithsonian has to offer in a much better way. So give me a moment to toggle over.
While you're toggling over, Dr. Sim, something that came up, you're talking about the medical schools. So we partnered with IUPUI Indianapolis, where our medical school is, but their digital library programs, they use laser scanners, because there's a lot of industry in Indiana. So they're using the light scanners to measure the objects. So we did a comparison of the two different objects, and we'll get into that. So being in a state with a lot of industry allowed us access to these tools that are very expensive for that end that IUPUI did. So opportunities for libraries to collaborate with industry as well.
And certainly this video from the Smithsonian has been updated since we first watched it in 2017. It is much more provocative, much more produced. You can tell they've done a lot more work on their artifact base. It was quite a treat to see the new video.
We honestly didn't know what we were getting into when we started this grant.
Yeah.
I knew that IUPUI had made 360 degrees like a cylinder. I'm looking at Dr. Griggs's coffee cup here. And then we learned about photogrammetry and using supercomputers to make 3D artifacts. So
then we got our own program. So because the supercomputer waiting around on it was difficult.
yeah, our student decided to install its own installation of the software. So, all right.
Okay, my friends, so I'm going to share with you the short video. And please give me a thumbs up so I know you're hearing the audio of the video once it starts playing.
When you think of the Smithsonian, you think museums, Washington, D.C., and the National Mall. But today's Smithsonian is so much more. We're harnessing the power of innovation and technology, where collections tell the story of who we are, where scientists decipher the world around us, and where art is pushed to its limit. Imagine all of this is yours to use. Welcome to Smithsonian Open Access, a vast and diverse digital resource, one that includes millions of images in 2D and 3D and almost 2 centuries of scientific data. Each and every one of us can now have direct access to the Smithsonian. Download, remix, reuse, and share the virtual for free. For your research, your art, your designs, for learning. Innovate just about anything you want. Because the Smithsonian's treasures belong to you. So go ahead, check it out. Unlock our collections. Explore the possibilities. What can you imagine?
So don't worry.
What a grand and glorious evening.
Well, sorry. Challenged, technically challenged. Give me a moment.
All right. What struck me was the applications of that to both formal and informal learning. So certainly you all have certain curriculum that you all have to get your students familiar with so that they can share that to meet state standards, but just also all the informal learning that happens in libraries and museums and our local cultural heritage institutions. And just how diverse and across the spectrum all the subjects were that were represented there, Dr. Sim.
I also want to remind us that a lot of our school systems, school corporations do have 3D printers, and there's a lot of materials and open resources that we can actually utilize from a platform such as that in order for us to engage our young minds in our classroom. And getting training on that is also available through vendors as well.
One thing that was pointed out to us, Dr. Sim, on that was by our state museum, the Culbertson Mansion, was the curator said, you know what? We'll be able to print off replicas of the artifacts that the students can hold in their hands. And this will help our visually impaired students who come, because they'll actually be able to feel like what this thing is that we're trying to talk about and show. And also the things that are brittle or can easily be damaged, kids can get their hands on and feel what they're like too.
Correct. Also wanted to share that there is a Facebook group that's available for you all to also explore with great ideas and educators on that platform. I personally like to engage as much as I can and show STEM careers, and that's how I used the spacesuit and talked about that alongside using library picture books and my own methods and instruction. And obviously we can also do a comparative Venn diagram about the human skeleton as well as this mammoth skeleton as well. I want to remind all of us that we always talk about diversity, inclusion, and equity. And yes, we need to, just like Ms. Hughes mentioned, talk about access for our visually impaired, but also it's access to devices. I was fortunate enough to have iPads, but having a resource such as the Smithsonian and also finding institutions like libraries to lend out materials to you is a wonderful way for you to apply the investment that they already have done on their end as an institution. So
yeah, and I just wanted to answer Deborah's question from the chat. So since the Smithsonian is a government supported entity, is it copyright free and we have permission to use it in displays and programming? I would say yes, because it is government supported. And that's part of the reason that you might want to look at your state libraries to participate in your state digital libraries, because the funding comes from IMLS, and then you're creating things that are part of the government. They're federally funded, and then the objects from your local cultural history are up online.
They're also housed there. And so you don't worry about paying for storage and things like that. So that makes it nice.
International users, I mean, I would think that the taxpayers of the US paid for them and you could use them to global citizenship, at least with the US resources, as far as my understanding is concerned.
correct. So we are a teaching institution, and I wanted to share with you some of the implications that Dr. Griggs and I can talk about. I'm going to actually hand him the baton because he was the brains of our efforts of how are we using 3D artifacts in our classroom, and he came up with a framework that he utilizes in the social studies methods course.
So part of what I realized when I was using, when I was teaching high school, so I came to high school later in life teaching, and I had all these artifacts from traveling, and my family were diplomats. And so I had all these artifacts. And so like, I didn't want to be that boring history teacher that I talked about earlier. And so I started bringing artifacts in. And what I realized was that knowledge, you could map knowledge on solid objects. And it's something that educators have known for a long time, but they don't know it really in that language. And literally, I would have students, I would talk about an object, they would investigate an object anthropologically or archaeologically, and then we would make the notes as the object was in the room, constantly doing verbal associations back to the object. And that caused that knowledge to be mapped on the object. Therefore, if they thought about the object or they thought about the knowledge, they were congruent with each other. And so it was really, really interesting. Well, when it came up with 3D artifacts, I thought this is even better, because some of my artifacts I wouldn't let the students touch, obviously, because they were really valuable. And I didn't want my mom to start hollering at me. So this, not only do you have the object that they can spin around and look, and they can actually get a lot closer to it than even using a some kind of enhancement device. You've got the metadata that's associated with. So it's very much, you can use the object as an identity device, like who used this object and what did they use it for, and if it's some kind of bag, you can make assumptions from it. You can use the object as an anthropological device where they're actually investigating through an inquiry process like the C3, or you can use the object purely as a memory device.
I'm just going to interject, Dr. Griggs, because we have
Okay.
about 30 seconds left.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
To wrap up, but I did want to point you to our publication that speaks about how he uses it in his own classroom. And obviously, if you're a STEM educator, I would be glad to share some of my insights from my methods course, but they're also free resources here on this slide. And I really do appreciate you all chiming in and coming into our session for today. And we can't do it unless we're together doing this together. So I'm so appreciative. And I know there might be only 10 seconds, but you can find us at IU Southeast and toss your questions our way. We're readily available to answer those.
Thank you so much.
And lots of other interesting objects up at IUPUI. They've been doing the Indianapolis Speedway. If you're into NASCAR, if you're into Formula One racing, and the Benjamin Harrison Museum, they've digitized artifacts, and they've been working with our medical school and dental school to digitize artifacts there as well. So human parts.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Mm.
Teeth.
Not good.